tonight.
We believe that it brings our law enforcement community to a place where they have the resources necessary to de-escalate some of these situations.
Senate Republicans released the Justice Act, what it means for the Capitol Hill push to pass police reform. Plus, we're joined by Senator Martha McSally to discuss that Senate plan, the coronavirus, and her new book. And
I'm not saying corporations are evil, but corporations exist for one thing: to make money, maximum profit.
Private prisons make big money, why critics say they're sacrificing safety to do so. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The GOP police reform bill unveiled for the first time on Capitol Hill. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. In response to police-related deaths and nationwide protests, today Senate Republicans outlined their police reform legislation.
They plan to bring it to the floor as soon as next week. CBN congressional correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now for more. Abigail, Senator Tim Scott spearheaded the effort. What more can you tell us about what's actually in the bill?
Well, John, Republicans hope that the Justice Act will rebuild trust between communities of color and law enforcement. And the three main goals of the bill are police reform, accountability, and increased transparency.
Too often we're having a discussion in this nation about, are you supporting the law enforcement community or are you supporting communities of color? This is a false binary choice.
While Scott believes police officers are overwhelmingly good people, he knows firsthand, as a black man stopped by law enforcement numerous times, how much reform is needed.
We find ourselves at a place with a package that I think speaks to the families that I spoke with yesterday who lost loved ones. We hear you. I think this package speaks very clearly to the young person who's concerned when he's stopped by the law enforcement officers. We see you.
The bill calls for an end to chokeholds, increases body camera use, and sets up a national database for reporting incidents involving force.
We're serious about making a law here. This is not about trying to create partisan differences. This is about coming together and getting an outcome.
Republican Congressman Pete Stauber, a former police officer shot in the line of duty, introduced the House legislation, agreeing it's time to enact meaningful change.
As someone who swore an oath to serve and protect my community, I was devastated watching the video of George Floyd dying at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer who swore that same oath.
Meanwhile, Democrats are pushing their own reform bill, criticizing the GOP plan as heavy on gestures, light on real reform.
This is not a choice between one side of an aisle or another. It is a choice between meaningful reforms in this moment or making symbolic gestures that will do nothing to save people's lives. It's a choice between action and inaction.
The Democrats' plan goes a step further by calling for an end to no-knock warrants and qualified immunity, which protects police officers from lawsuits. Ultimately, the two sides will have to come together on a compromise bill if any of the proposed ideas are to become law. Back to you, John and Jenna.
And we know you'll be keeping an eye on that. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson, thanks for your reporting today.
Well, while reform might be the word of the day, calls to defund the police continue to resonate across parts of the country.
CBN National Security Correspondent Eric Phillips joins us now with a closer look. Eric, those calls mean different things depending on who you ask.
Well, they do, John and Jenna. I spoke to two longtime veterans in law enforcement who say if you're talking about defunding in terms of reallocating money to other areas that can serve society, then they're on board. But if by defunding you mean abolish police departments, not so much.
This has been a nightmare that none of us ever want to relive.
In discussing the best ways to ensure public safety, Jim Birch, president of the National Police Foundation, believes abolishing police departments would be a catastrophic mistake. But he says shifting money to other agencies could work, especially when it comes to issues like mental health.
A police officer only has a few tools at their disposal to handle any situation that they come upon. A mental health crisis is not a great matchup for a police officer.
But he adds there can be concern.
Are they going to be available to respond at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning? Are they going to be able to respond on Sunday afternoon? If police officers are no longer responding to those calls, who's going to go and help that family that's in crisis? Because the last thing any of us want is to say, the police are no longer going to respond to these types of problems, and we're going to shift this amount of money to these organizations, only to find out that these organizations who now have this responsibility themselves say that's not enough money for us to do it. Now no one's doing it.
Birch underscores that an overhaul of policing is needed.
What we're really talking about here is fundamental change. We're not talking about something that you can fix in 4 hours of training. We're not talking about something that you can fix by giving a lecture to those who are currently out on the streets today. We're talking about a major fundamental change.
The number one issue in policing today is police accountability.
Patrick Oliver leads the criminal justice program at Cedarville University and served in law enforcement for more than 27 years. He says fundamental change comes down to the people.
Government is best served by godly men and women who understand that they're accountable ultimately to God.
He says government is God ordained and the power an officer wields is second to none.
So from verbal warning to deadly force, that's how much discretion a law enforcement officer has in our society. That's more than any other job in our society. And this job is only for people who are honorable men that love truth, who will judge rightly, and who will do what is right.
Both men say changing the landscaping of policing will be a major effort that has to start at the local level and perhaps even with each individual officer. John and Jenna.
Martha McSally serves the people of Arizona in the United States Senate. She is also the author of a new book, Dare to Fly, Simple Lessons in Never Giving Up. Senator Martha McSally, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, we want to discuss your book, but before we do, police reform is on the minds of so many people right now, and Americans are looking to Washington, specifically lawmakers, to help address it. What do you think is the best way to reform?
Well, we're introducing legislation with Tim Scott. I'm a co-sponsor today. In our appropriate federal role, we're using incentives for local police if they're getting federal grants in things like de-escalation training and banning of chokeholds, no knock warrant reporting, and also a really important element, and I can relate to this as someone who's in the military, is what's called duty to intervene. Anybody who watched the horrific murder of George Floyd, not only could you see the murder happening right there, but you saw 3 other officers who were facilitating or standing by and doing nothing as others were pleading for his life. And as I look at that from someone who was in the military, I don't understand how a human being gets to that place to do what that first officer did to kill him, but how the others get to a place where they're tolerating it or facilitating it and not intervening. And so one element of our extensive legislation, which we hope to vote on next week in the Senate, is training on duty to intervene, that if you see another officer using excessive force, doing something wrong, even if they outrank you, you need to step in and stop it. You don't facilitate or just stand by and do nothing. This is a key element of stopping these crimes from happening.
In your book, you detail the importance of service. You know, in your life, it's also been a theme. Talk to us about why it is so important, you think, to be in that field of service.
Well, I lost my dad when I was 12, and I was the youngest of 5 kids, and I grew up being told I could be anything I wanted to be. But as I was looking for opportunities to get an education, I didn't want to saddle my single mom with debt. And I was looking to channel my life in a positive way. And so I went to the Air Force Academy, and you pay back in service instead of student debt. And I share a story of 26 years in the military, going from being a motion sick kid, chubby, shy kid, to being the first woman in our nation's history to fly in combat and later command a squadron in combat. The core values of our military shaped everything of who I am: integrity, service, and excellence. And I just would encourage others out there of whatever age to step up and serve in any way you can, in the military, in the community. There's so many ways to serve others.
Senator McSally, we're living in difficult times right now. We're often reporting about police-related deaths or coronavirus-related deaths. You yourself, as you just mentioned, experienced loss, the death of your father at a young age. What can you offer in the form of perspective or encouragement based on what you learned from losing a loved one?
Well, I went on a journey, which I share in Dare to Fly, of losing my dad at 12. He knew in his spirit, in between heart attacks when he was in the hospital, that he was going to go be with the Lord. And luckily, he called for his children to come see him. And I didn't understand all this at the time, but I got to visit with him. And many people don't get to visit with their loved ones and spend that time with them. But he took his last breath the next day. But before that, he told me to make him proud. And I went on a journey of grief and suffering and being angry at God, but eventually, again, by the grace of God and the help of people around me, to find my own faith, to find my own strength and healing in that suffering, to find my own purpose, that God's purpose and calling for my life. And I share these stories in my book, but they're common to all of us. We can all relate to grief and adversity and unfair things happening to us. We can all relate to fear. A lot of people are really fearful right now. And I share how I was able to, in the darkest hours of my life, hear God's healing hand and his voice touching me and directing me. And I think about the story of Joseph. What others intended for evil, God used for good. And that's certainly one of the themes that I have in my book. And I think a lot of people need to hear that right now.
You mentioned the word fear. A lot of people living in fear right now. And when we think about the COVID-19 and this whole pandemic, your state is one of those that's seeing a big spike. Senator, what should be the response there?
Well, we need not live in fear. I know there's a lot of fears for lives, for our loved ones, and for livelihoods right now. And this virus is among us. So let's all work together to allow people to safely work, safely go about their lives while we still fight this virus. We will defeat this virus as we're investing in cures and we're investing in treatments and vaccines, but it's going to be among us. So let's each do our part.
All right, Senator Martha McSally of Arizona, it's good to have you. Thank you for your time today, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. People can go to daretofly.us. You can get the book, but you can also share your inspiring stories with me. We could all use encouragement. I bring you into the cockpit of the A-10 on combat missions and all sorts of stories that I have there, but really it's our common element of getting through adversity and finding our faith. So share your stories with me, daretofly.us.
All right, Senator McSally, thank you very much.
God bless y'all. Take care.
Coming up, why some claim America's prison population, the largest in the world, may be living in a safety hazard. After this.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
And welcome back. Well, the U.S. has the largest world population and prisons of people in prison, and it comes with a hefty price tag. For some corporations, it's a major money enterprise.
That's right, Jenna. Making income off of locking people up has long been a thriving business. But as Jennifer Wishon reports, these prisons for profit are now falling out of favor.
Private prisons have been around for decades. They promote themselves as cost-effective community partners, primed to save taxpayer dollars. But critics say that's because they cut corners, creating unsafe conditions. It's big business. Major private prison companies are even publicly traded, and last year raked in billions of profits. According to the Sentencing Project, they operate in 29 states, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons relies on them too. John Pfaff, professor at Fordham Law School and author of Locked In, The True Causes of Mass Incarceration and How to Achieve Real Reform, says even though private prisons only house about 9% of the total prison population, they grab the most attention.
I think people feel like there's something distinctly morally repugnant about paying cash to put people in cages.
They get paid for each inmate locked up in their facilities. In 2012, Corrections Corporation of America, now known as CoreCivic, offered a shocking deal. The company would purchase prisons in 48 states if the states would guarantee a 90% occupancy rate.
I'm not saying corporations are evil, but corporations exist for one thing: to make money, maximum profit. That's okay if you're making widgets or toothpaste, but when you're dealing with people and you're making money off of prison, you're starting to treat people like they're toothpaste.
Jesus Cardenas was locked up for check fraud. He served part of his time in a state prison before being transferred to a private one, and says he immediately noticed a difference in the level of security.
They were just going through the motions. These officers that were there were just drawing a paycheck.
He says fights like this one at a private correction center in Idaho were a daily occurrence. And unless someone was severely hurt, he says they went unnoticed. ICE also contracts with private facilities. In a federal lawsuit filed last month, a Mexican woman says within hours of being deported, she and 2 other women were taken from their dorms and raped by officials at a facility run by CoreCivic in Houston. Criminologist Fran Buntman says when a government detains or sentences someone, it has an obligation to see it through.
We've taken away their liberty rights to control their own lives. We as a society and the government as the institution looking after them actually have a responsibility to their welfare. We as a society cannot subcontract out that responsibility to a private agency.
Incarceration is a big ticket item. States spend $50 billion a year. And all said, when you factor in police and prosecutors, it costs a total of $200 billion tax dollars to round up, prosecute, and keep inmates behind bars. Over the last year, activists successfully waged campaigns to squeeze private prisons financially, pressuring half a dozen major banks to cut off their financing. Investors pulled back too, and that could keep the companies from growing. Professor Pfaff says some private prisons do operate better than others, just like those in the public system, and points out state-owned prisons also have incentives to keep their doors open. It's just less transparent. No matter where inmates serve time, he encourages Americans to focus on the power of redemption.
Jesus never wrote anybody off, right? That very last moment, he didn't care what the person next to him on the cross was up there for. And I think that there's a very important lesson in what he didn't say and what he didn't ask about how we should view, even those who have done amongst the worst things possible, that we should never just throw them away.
During the last decade, the overall prison rate has fallen by 15%, but America still locks up more people than any other country, and private prisons appear here to stay, at least for now. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And staying on the topic of prisons and health, prisons are being hit especially hard by the coronavirus pandemic. According to data collected by the New York Times, cases among inmates have doubled in the past month. Some 68,000 have been confirmed, and virus-related prison deaths are on the rise, up about 73% since mid-May.
And across the globe in China, a big surge in confirmed cases. In Beijing, more than 100 positive tests in recent days.
Even in countries that have demonstrated the ability to suppress transmission, countries must stay alert to the possibility of resurgence. Last week, China reported a new cluster of cases in Beijing after more than 50 days without a case.
And here in the U.S., a number of states are seeing a spike in cases too. Texas, Arizona, the Carolinas, and Oregon are among the hardest hit recently. And we'll be right back with more Faith Nation after this.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the Home Front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
And welcome back. Well, you may have seen the heartwarming stories where high school students serve their communities by befriending an older person.
The so-called adopting a senior has been taking place for years. And now, John, we're seeing the reversal. Residents at a senior living community connecting with seniors in the class of 2020. Here's Mark Martin with the story.
We've seen how this pandemic put a damper on family celebrations, from birthdays to marriages to senior class milestones like proms and graduation ceremonies. To help lift up members of the class of 2020, residents at the senior living community Westminster Canterbury on Chesapeake Bay reached out with advice and lessons learned from the past.
You are there to learn. Go to every class. I never cut a class while I was in college.
Resident and former teacher Neola Waller chatted with Cox High School senior Alexandria Pisano as part of the program Seniors Celebrating Seniors. By using a birdsong tablet, the video communication tool developed by Westminster Canterbury, the residents safely spoke with the graduating seniors. What kind of advice did you give her?
Well, having taught seniors for 30 years, I have lots of advice, and your time is too short for me to tell it all. But I had some items. For one, I said, just remember, when you go to college, you will be learning something, and your parents will expect you to graduate with a marketable skill.
Pisano plans to attend Old Dominion University to major in neonatal nursing. She describes Waller, who's 91 years young, as an amazing woman.
As a first-generation college student, it was really hard to kind of figure out what I was expecting to get into. So her adopting me really made me kind of get inspiration on what to expect and how to pursue my career. She gave me really great advice.
And Pisano says what made her relationship with Waller even more special was the fact that Waller taught at Cox High School for 30 years.
I still keep in touch with a lot of my students.
It was just amazing to speak to her, and we had a great relationship, and honestly I feel like we're gonna have a forever relationship. Like, I'm gonna come back from school and like visit her just to talk to her about advice on what I should do in school, because I know I'm gonna be lost.
She has a wonderful smile, which I think will be very healing and accepting of her patients. I've loved talking with you.
I know you give me such great advice.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
New technology keeping people safe from the spread of germs. We'll explain next.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Finally tonight, as more stores and restaurants begin to reopen, one Detroit business is working to make sure people feel safe as they head out.
That's right. They've created a 3D printer touchless door opener, allowing for a hands-free, germ-free opening.
It's print to order, so as soon as we get an order, we'll try and get them out within 24 to 72 hours, depending on how many you need.
Similar products have been out on the market for years, but have been costly and hard to install. The 3D printed version by the company Toad Open costs only a whopping $50. Jenna, I think that's what I want for Christmas.
It's all about avoiding those germs. I'm in. I like that idea.
All in as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for
watching.
watching.
Have a good night.